And with that, we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Light 'em Up Lounge. It's Wednesday, time for another inspiring show, time for another inspiring conversation here with our expert panel, with our friends and family, all the people joining us here via Zoom, our other guests joining us over on the Facebook live stream. Today is a very interesting show for us. We tried to pull off the impossible and have a live guest joining us from Cuba, Joel Castillo, tobacco farmer and cigar roller from world-renowned Pinar del Río. Well, in the process, we had to learn that Zoom is actually forbidden in Cuba, and he couldn't make it live with us here via Zoom. So we then tried to record an interview, which proved to be all sorts of problematic as well. Nevertheless, we managed to get some quotes from Joel. We managed to put together a video with the material that he sent from Cuba. He's one of the very few people who has something like internet in Cuba and who speaks decent enough English to join us for an international session. So we try to make the impossible possible. And on the one hand, I have to admit we failed a bit, but we succeeded in other parts. So we'll have Joel joining us at least via video for the opening segment of the show. And then I'm delighted to have an all-star lineup yet again, dear friends and family and avid supporters from day one of Light 'em Up. Jose Blanco, here with me tonight, George Brightman joining us, and in just a few minutes we'll have Karl from the Stogie Lads tuning in as well. And together with these gentlemen and all of you, we want to discuss some of the bits and pieces of information that Joel will be sharing with us via the video. But we also want to talk about the situation in Cuba and some of the memories George and Jose can share with us from their visits to Cuba. And so we'll dive right in. As always, if anybody has questions, thoughts, comments, please make yourselves heard. Put your questions and all your thoughts underneath the Facebook live stream into the comments. I'm always watching, always following along. And yeah, without further ado, let's welcome our guests first and foremost. Jose Blanco, welcome. Good to see you, my friend.
Good evening, good morning, people from all over the world. It's great to be here. It's always great when I'm with Mr. Brightman, which I've known for about 117 years. And the Pope, as we all know him, probably one of the most knowledgeable walking encyclopedias in the world. Mr. Brightman, how are you?
Jose, thank you. As always, you're too kind. I love it. I'm so glad to be on this with you today, and I'm going to be eager to see what we get shown in this video, because you and I both know that you know we will likely. I don't want to shade what we're going to see, but you and I both know that the circumstances there are pretty dire right now. So we'll likely have to filter some of the remarks that we hear. But anyway, I love it. I'm so glad to join. I'm so glad to see you, and sharing some time with you, regardless of the topic, is always a pleasure for me. We're lucky that we can do this. You look comfortable where you are. Reinhard looks like he's still in the throes of winter. But meantime, I'm sitting here in the mid 80s, Fahrenheit, out here in Bethesda. So it's glorious. Perfect day to enjoy. Look, I couldn't bear to smoke a Marifel outdoors. So I picked my second favorite, the Don Carlos Double Robusto.
What part of Bethesda are you in?
Say it again.
What part of Bethesda are you in? I used to live there.
Oh, it's right off Old Georgetown Road. It's on Delray Avenue, not far from the Woodmont Triangle. This is Capital Cigar. It's where I always used to do my Draper dialogues. It's just under new ownership now.
I gotcha.
So it's a whole new ball game. The lounge looks glorious. I mean, here, wait a minute. I'll just give you guys a quick. Nice
nice.
patio setup out here. The inside is remarkable. It's really, but it's great to have, you know, when you can have indoor, outdoor, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
What are you
I live
burning
right
today?
there off the Beltway. Let's see. A
You gotta
Flores.
remember.
Yeah, A
Oh, cool.
Flores. Yeah, Grand Series, 1975.
Neat.
Well, George, what a beautiful setup. I'm a bit jealous, I have to say, regarding the weather conditions and the temperatures. We were hit by a sudden little winter surprise. I believe Dejan can probably attest to that, freezing his balls off on the balcony in Vienna.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of being indoors and enjoying my cigar with everybody in a cozier environment. But yeah, it's a privilege to host the show together with all of you. Again, we tried the impossible and have Joel joining us via live stream and joining us via Zoom here. As I said earlier, unfortunately, we had to learn the process that Zoom doesn't allow any call-ins from Cuba, and so we recorded some bits and pieces. Joel kindly sent us some videos from the farms. I have to say, and I have to admit and be very frank and honest, it's not of top-notch quality when it comes to the video and sound. That being said, I still hope that for all of you, everybody joining us, everybody tuning in, it's one of those rare opportunities where you get to take a behind the scenes look, not only of just any tobacco farm, but a tobacco farm located in the heart of one of the most widely renowned tobacco growing regions all around the world, Pinar del Río in Cuba.
Before we actually look at that, I should say one thing that I think probably you was an accident, but you said it backwards. It's not that Zoom doesn't allow transmissions from Cuba. Cuba doesn't allow Zoom.
Well, that's probably a very accurate and fair statement. In any case, it didn't work. However, we have our video set up, at least a bit of a behind-the-scenes glimpse. So without further ado, here is
Let's take a peek.
Joel Castillo Batista joining us from Pinar del Río over in Cuba. And it's about a 10-minute video, so please stay with us, stay tuned, and take a look at the situation in Cuba together with our dear friend, Joel Castillo Batista.
Buckle up.
My name is Joel Castillo Batista. Okay, I'm a farmer, roll good Cuban cigars from this region, Pinar del Río. I will give you a small tour in my farm, included also my house. Eso me dijo que buscaran una gente. Oye, tío, para que esto es para el hijo tuyo ahora, el videito este. Que no. ¿Y para dónde tú vas ahora? Esto es Facebook aquí, el tío mío, construyendo el bohío. El secadero tabaco aquí.
Reinhard, can people hear me now if I say
Porque
something?
el ciclón lo destruyó todo. Aquí
Okay,
trabajando
so as you
con los
can
recursos
see-
que nos dio el gobierno.
He's saying that the government gave him some resources, and what they're
Ya
doing
eché a vender el video,
is
güey.
they're trying
Ya
to
eché a vender el
repair
video.
a curing barn. And if you could see, it's a different style of a curing barn that you would see in Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, or in Honduras. Even under Cuban standard, and George could have testified to this also, this is a very strange and rare.
Andamos,
And
que le
I
gusta la
think
foto.
they're doing it this way because of the lack of wood and also Ghana to top, because the majority of the times they're like this, not this way, like in a triangle way. I think George could
Yeah.
elaborate on that too.
Absolutely correct. I wanted to emphasize that what you're looking at is a jerry-rigged system, the best that they can do with the limited resources on the ground there. And, you know, they're using the number one resource they have there, manual labor, right? And so, but basically,
Okay.
the interesting thing that you're looking at is the, sorry.
Okay, let's
I
see what he
don't
has
want to talk
say.
over the guy. Let's hear
Remember,
the
we are
guy
Cuban
speak.
people, we are full of needs. Okay? If you can help us with different things, I don't know, clothes, medicine, everything that you can help farmers or support farmers, you can send it to Cuba through friends, email, or something. I will give you my phone number, plus 53 5577 3029. If you want to help farmers to keep the tradition with tobacco plants, please try to help us. So, that's the place where I live with my family. So my family and I, we have been here during 4 generations, even before the revolution used to be private. Okay? Yeah. Okay. That's the real, authentic farm. If you take a look around, that's how it looks. A real and authentic farm. Okay? Here is the place where normally farmers, we take a break, snack. Also, we roll cigars. Please follow me. That's the instruments that we use normally to roll cigars. Wood, cutters, chaveta, nice lighters, of course, to burn the cigar even, and guillotines. Okay? So, remember, to make a good cigar, the 4 things that we need is 2 cigar plantations. 1 from the sun, 1 from the shade. The shade plantation, we call it cheese clothes. It's with this kind of sheet. Okay? So, tobacco plantations in the sun is for filler and binder. And tobacco plantation under cheese clothes is just for wrappers. Okay? I will introduce you some members of my family. That's my brother. Okay? That's my uncle. Farmers, we live like this. Easy life. We're taking a break after lunch. We're smoking good Cuban cigars. You can see in the ash. The cigar is produced by us. The person who rolls cigars is only members of the family. My brother and my uncle. Okay? Remember, if you visit Cuba, you come to this place. The name is, or the nickname is El Guajirito. Means little farmer. So come and visit us. Okay? To make a good Cuban cigars, first requires minimum 5 leaf, depends size and shape. And for the filler, we have to blend the 3 different leaves inside in the same plants. 1 from the bottom that give combustion, 1 for the center that give aroma, 1 from the top that give strength and flavor. In Spanish, the name of that kind of leaf is volado seco ligero, combustion, aroma, strength. Even the leaf inside the cigars have to be rolled or in that way. Some people, they use the leaf and they make a tube Some people, as I do, we make like a book. See? So 3 different leaves for the filler. Now, depends. If I want to make a strong cigar in flavor, I use more leaf on the top of the plants because that leaf brings strength. Okay? Every Cuban cigars is by hands, as I told you. That's to balance cigar inside. We got here the filler. That's bander. So filler, bander, and the rope. Remember, the rope is a specific kind of leaf from different plantation because it's elastic, like leather. So, as I told you, every Cuban cigars is handmade, like this. The cigars, we don't press too much. If it's not the throat, it's not good when we puffing. So, this cigar now is normal. The factory is putting a wooden press. They press it for the shape during 30-20 minutes. Normally farmers, we use the press sometimes, but the most things that we use is newspaper. Why newspaper? The newspaper is gonna absorb the humidity inside the cigars, like this. Now, normally, here or 20 minutes in the sun, depends on the weather conditions, and the newspaper is going to absorb the humidity. Now, I prepare the wrappers. The wrappers normally are the beauty, nice texture. With the wrapper, this is a special touch that I give always. I make.
Ya, de ahí viene el baile.
From la India. No, está acabado, está acabado. No, this one we can move up like this. Okay, okay. No, yeah, down, yes. Good. Ya, niño. Ahí, ahí. Ahí.
A la vuelta ahora, vale.
Give me the tour.
You're gonna turn around.
Joel, por favor, que
You guys should get in there. Get in there.
Joel,
Thank you.
yo le digo que la cueva todavía se loco me tiene.
Well, Joel Castillo Batista joining us from Cuba, from Pinar del Río, at least via video. Again, I do apologize that we couldn't have Joel live here with us, and I know that some of the audio and video probably wasn't of the very highest quality, but I can tell you it was one hell of a job to try and get that video footage sent over from Joel, despite the challenging internet and Wi-Fi conditions over on Cuba. But I must say that it's heartwarming to see that footage, and I'm very grateful that Joel provided us with a little bit of an inside and behind the scenes look. And I would love for Jose, George, and in just a few moments, Karl, to give us a bit of perspective, to share their thoughts and their opinions on what we just saw. Some of the curing barns, thankfully, we saw some of the plantations. We saw a little bit of folkloristic dance from Cuba. Joel is hosting all sorts of tourists and people coming to visit him, where he offers some farm rolled cigars. And yeah, what a charming video. Joel, throughout, we've been in contact for weeks now, and we tried to jump on video calls and share a couple of good conversations. He always said, well, you have to understand, it's Cuba, we're farmers, we don't have internet, nothing's working. So it was a challenge, but a very charming one, and I'm very grateful for Joel and everything he shared. And so Jose, George, and Karl, chime in. Let's talk about what we saw and put some context and some perspective to those heartwarming and moving images.
Let me tell you something. On the standard of the United States or the rest of the world, people who would not be tobacco lovers would just say, it's a pity, it's a shame. What do they do that? But I don't look at it that way. That guy should get an Oscar. You know why? Because with the limited resources that they have, really struggling to tell a story about his family, what they're going through. What really shocked me was, and I hope he doesn't get in trouble for that, begging like the international community, you know, for help, that they're farmers and things like that. Those are things that maybe because now they're a little bit softer in Cuba, but I can guarantee you 10 years before he would say that, and they would go arrest him and probably put him to jail. I hope nothing happens to him. He seems like a character. I think, I don't agree with, you know, with the political situation there. I do love the Cubans a lot. I have a lot of Cuban friends there. I have a lot of Cuban friends out there. But putting aside the politics, I say the guy opened up his heart, and to see just the way he's struggling to build that curing barn that George can tell you, it's not a typical curing barn that you see that. It tells you the disaster of losing 9,400 and something curing barns in September. And from we see from the press release from Grama and from Albanos, they're saying it's only 50% that they will grow tobacco. When they're saying 50, you can be sure it's not fucking 50. It's going to be less than that. So they're trying to be political to their partners and for people all over the world to not to struggle. But the guy gets, you know, like on Britain's Got Talent or America Got Talent, you know, he gets a 10 from me for effort, for honesty, for sincerity, and, you know, to letting people know the real situation. I hope I meet him one day, and I hope he doesn't get into trouble. Those are my 2 cents. I know George can elaborate on that also. George, you're muted.
Sorry. Well said. I agree that it takes a lot of heart to expose yourself that way, because you know, believe me, the Cuban people are proud too. He didn't want to have to say, please send money because they're getting nothing from the government. But what he was facing is that this is going to be the worst harvest in Cuba's recorded history. The smallest, which means that because yield is way down, quality will be way down. It's going to put them under enormous pressure at a time when they are just desperate for currency and for, let's say this. And Jose, I hope you agree with me on this. I think this is an unprecedented time for Cuba let's say in the world cigar stage. I believe that they are fighting for their life right now. People like us who have known each other for 127 years, as you said, we'll never lose respect or admiration for Cuba, what it's done, and have in our prayers what it could become again. But all we can do right now is mourn the present state of affairs. They are on the world stage. They have to be embarrassed. Their production is low. The quality, the output of the top quality cigars is lower than it's ever been. At the same time that they're raising prices, it's as if the great Bordeaux, the great chateaus of France started to produce table wine instead of Grand Cru, and were still increasing their prices. So it's a tragedy. It's a challenge, but yet for everybody else in the cigar industry, it's really an opportunity for the rest of the world, which has formerly been Cuba-centric in its respect, to find something new. Now, none of that is to take anything away. I thought the most interesting thing that we saw in that video, aside from the, the sorry state of trying to build that tiny little curing barn in his field, was that he had erected that beautiful platform, which was obviously also somewhere between his house and the fields, where he could give demonstrations of rolling and obviously sells farm cigars. When Reinhard, when you and I were talking before the other day, I said, ask him if he has any neighbors that are cigar makers, and if they do farm cigars, and obviously the answer was already in the video that needless to say, they need to put on a show, attract people who have come there, and those people want farm cigars. And when I saw him admit that they use newspaper for reinforcing the bunches, I loved it because it reminds me of a couple of great cigar makers that Jose and I know from our youth. There's a very famous Honduras Cuban cigar maker, Rolando Reyes Sr., who used to do the most magnificent figurados, and he did them all using the newspaper method, which he was taught by the father of Ernesto Carrillo, right? So the beauty, it's amazing how these things come around. That was taught by a guy who had landed in Miami immediately after the revolution, and was working his way along and doing the best as he could, and then he teaches it to another young guy who's struggling even harder in Honduras, and we get some miraculous cigars out of it, and a technique which to this day is impressive, because when you see rollers that are used to doing that, they can use those newspaper, they can make a bunch exactly, in other words, they can make a 7x47. It might have a shaggy foot. It might have, a different kind of calf, but they make magnificent, accurate, beautiful cigars. And if you take a wheel of those cigars consistently, their weight is not that much different than what it would be in a factory where they had been given materials by their supervisor, and they were using bunches, molds to create the bunches. So it was impressive. And it's unfortunately, the primary message of all of that is, here's a guy that's farming. He has no choice but to sell the majority of his crop to the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, who will then distribute it to the state-run factories. But he finds a way to keep some tobacco back enough that he can make cigars in the field at the farm to tourists who come there, which is how he squeezes income out of it.
George, the funny thing is, and a lot of people might not believe it, I don't know how many acres he has or whatever it is. He probably makes more money selling the farm cigars to tourists than what he gets from the crop that is sold to
absolutely. Than what the government pays him. Than what the government pays him. Absolutely right. No question. I think that's what I would say is, the income that he gets from selling farm rolls to the tourists who come through is the difference between, starvation, like trying to live off la libreta is impossible, right? And the limited income that they're granted from, especially when, they have no inputs. So, and they have no infrastructure after having lost so many of the barns, the curing barns. His crop, my guess would be, again, I don't know the size, how many hectares he has under cultivation there, but my guess would be that his yield will be, 10, 15% of what it's been in years past.
Probably. But
I wanted to. Sorry. What I want to add one thing, because you'll have input on this, Jose. What I was interested in finding out from Joel, was what seed types he was growing and if there were any hybrids underway there.
The other thing I was going to say, remember, the Cuba gets hit in September. So this is 6 months after. And you could see after 6 months, he hasn't been able to put together a small curing bar because, to be honest, and George could attest to this, on the Cuban standard, that is a very, very, very small curing barn. I would say it's one of the smallest. So I guess he got some wood, he got some kind of, and is still after 6 months trying to put it together.
Trying to build it, trying to finish it.
I don't know if on the clip I saw a little bit of tobacco, maybe drying. Was there a bit of tobacco there, right? Right.
He had like 3 or 4. He had like 3 or 4 kuhes of
Exactly.
hands,
Yeah. But indeed,
which I'm sure part of that was to show that to the people who are coming through, so they see tobacco in the barns and understand the process. You know, he could be showing them, we raise the poles higher, and the colors change, the heat rises. But what we saw there was tragic, right? Because there are no resources. He doesn't eat. I'm sure that they could rebuild barns if they had the materials to do it, but there's no support for that.
exactly.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what you shared, and I wanted to provide a little bit of context. Joel, in some of the personal conversations that we had, shared that he's taking care of roughly 20 acres of farmland around his little barn there, and the few bits and pieces of infrastructure that we saw, and he was mentioning that they're growing Criollo and Corojo seed varietals. He wasn't very specific about the question in regards to hybrids or which exact strains they were using, but I wanted to share this bit of information with you regardless. And to everybody joining us, if you jumped on late, we had Joel Castillo from Pinar del Río chiming in via video at the beginning of our show. So if you missed it, please be on the lookout for the rewatch and jump back a little bit to see the bits and pieces that you shared with us. Now, Karl, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us. I know it was a rushed action for you to jump on here, and I hope that you had the opportunity over on the live stream to see the video that Joel provided us with. But what are your thoughts and your perceptions when you look at those heartwarming images and some of the footage that Joel provided us with?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Jose, it's great to see you again. George, great cigar choice. I love that Don Carlos Double Robusto. It's one of my favorites for sure. No, I thought it was interesting to see. Like you say, it is in a way heartwarming. I mean, he seemed like a chipper guy. Of course, like Jose said there, it is kind of putting on a show as best as he can from the extremely limited resources he seems to have. And yeah, even I mean, I'm still fairly new to this whole cigar thing. I mean, I was down in the DR about a month ago, and even I know that curing barn looked strange. I reacted to that too. I've never seen anything like that either. So yeah, it is dire, and it is in a way tragic, like George says. I think it was interesting to see something at least. I mean, I was curious when the whole Habanos festival was going on, because all this stuff is in such a bad way right now to see. But I mean, from the very limited coverage from down there, all the people that went, didn't seem like they could share anything. They went to some farm and had lunch in a tent, but there was no real connection or contact with any production. I guess there barely is any production. So, yeah, it was cool to see something. I think it probably a lot of it is for show, like that tobacco is probably there for whatever tourists do come. So there's something to show. But yeah, I mean, it is crazy what's going on. It is crazy. I mean, I heard something about 50 million Cuban cigars last year, which if that's true, Fuente makes more cigars in a year than the entire island. That would be bad. And then the news now that George Brightman mentioned quickly there, that we're facing the weakest harvest in history. That's what Half Wheel reported, and I know that Cigar Aficionado posted that, I think today or yesterday. I can't even imagine what's gonna happen from there, especially for us in Europe that have had such a connection to Cuban cigars. I mean, I'm seeing so few Cuban cigars being smoked in the lounges here in Stockholm already. I mean, I think the days are past. It feels like it really does.
You know that there's something that I've been talking in the last couple of days with a lot of people, and I know that George could give a lot of input on this, and Carl probably too, because Carl goes to numbers. Let's just go back a bit in time, and let's go back to 2000, let's say 2008, because George remembers that at one time Castro got in his head, and that was the year 2000, that they were going to make 220 million cigars. They did make the 220 million cigars, but 60 or 70 million of those were returned to Cuba by containers.
Yeah.
You could open a box of Monte Cristo, 13 across, and you could see 13 different colors of wrappers. So what they did was 2001, 2002, they started, lowering down the production. Go to 2010. So if you take 2010, when they were making around 170, 160 million, and then every year they went down by 10 million, some years 15 million. So you go, let's say 2019, where they're doing 110, then to 2020, you go all of a sudden to 90, and from 90 you go to 70, and from 70 you go to around 50. What a lot of people are not taking into consideration, if you add up all those years, you're going to add up between 150 to 200 million cigars that before were going into the market, that now they're not in the market. So all those people in Switzerland, in Germany, in Hong Kong, in France, in Spain, that had millions and millions and millions of cigars,
They have nothing.
the well dried up. So all of a sudden, of course, the quality, the high prices, and what Cuba has done is just totally ridiculous. Now, at the same time, they're making more money today selling 50 million cigars than when they were selling 150 million cigars. Just look how the prices were, that a Cohiba in Spain was $30 and now it's 66. And the limit, the Cohibas, Behicas, and all that is 300. Germany just got a new Partagas, and each one is 220 euros each. So just do the numbers, and I can tell you the Chinese and Habanos are very happy. Now, who are screwed are the farmers, who are screwed are the rollers, who are screwed are the workers in all those factories that are making between $14 to $18 a month.
Yeah. And there's no relief in sight for them. For all of the people who make these cigars possible, whether it's the pre-industrial or the factory work, there's not going to be an uptick in quality or an uptick in yield, which goes hand in hand, anytime soon. They don't have the inputs that they need, and they don't have the infrastructure. Even if they had record plantings, they wouldn't have the ability to put the tobacco into barns and get it into the warehouses for aging. So it's bleak. I'm not trying to be negative at all about what we saw, because I'm encouraged that he has that much heart, and to tell that story, and that he's doing the things necessary to keep feeding his extended family. But by the way, the other thing I would say is I love Reinhard describing that as a folkloric dance. I think what we saw when they were doing that little clip at the end is that TikTok is allowed in Cuba, since the Chinese own it. So you can see all the TikTok videos that you want. And they're trying to make one of their own for us to get a little lift at the end of that video.
That's actually a very nice way of putting it. Indeed, I found it very charming overall, despite the challenging situation. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, George. You traveled to Cuba many times. You saw the situation in years past. I mean, can you recall some of the moments when you actually had the pleasure of walking those farms to see those curing barns way back in the days? What was the situation like? What was the feeling like, both for you to visit those places, but in particular, what was the perception that you had regarding the people, the infrastructure, and how they lived back then compared to what we just saw moments ago with Joel's video?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, as a lifelong, I don't know, obsessive about Cuba from long before I was in the cigar business. My first visits to Cuba, initially, your experience is all around Havana. But when I got to the Vuelta, the most storied cigar farmland in the world, in the history of civilized smoking, it's electric. It's impossible to resist the electricity in the air, and it doesn't matter whether you're by yourself or with a handful of other people. When you see the Valle and you see this beautiful tobacco, and then meet the farmers, and you travel from one farm to the next, and so I first saw it in the 80s and early 90s, through the 90s into the aughts. Those were years of promise. Those were years when things were changing. In some ways politically, but they were certainly changing economically. They would come through some tough times. They had adjusted after the fall of the Soviet Union and a difference in economic support for the entire island. But they were learning, how to make do. And these guys, look, no matter where you are in the world, farmers, especially small plot farmers, which most tobacco growers are, they always have simple lives. These are not people that drive around in a brand new truck and with fresh clothes on and go home to their manor, and that's for people that live in the city and have access to different resources and maybe support from the government in a variety of different ways. Farmers are classic in being, key in the barter economy, in subsistence and growing. In other words, their surrounding areas, trading for vegetables, and raising what animals they can for their own sustenance. In other words, they're self-reliant. But in the 80s and the 90s and the early aughts, there was nothing but excitement for the fact that there was growing recognition and a growing audience for the fruits of their labor. And for a while, it felt as if not only the increased attention, but the increased prices for cigars was getting, and primarily, I would say this impact was felt more outside of Cuba than in, but nonetheless, in Cuba, they seem to be blessing farmers with some more resources, more inputs, more support, more access. The Ministry of Agriculture would pay attention to them and lend support through various kinds of crises, whether it's an eruption of blue mold or black shank or anything else, or how they would support them after a storm blew through. Look, the history of Cuba is that every decade there's some kind of interruption to the steady progress of the cycle. In other words, in a 10-year span, there's always some downturn for one reason or another. The weather affects the crop, whether it's catastrophic like a hurricane and subsequent flooding, or whether it's hail during harvest time when you've got this beautiful tobacco in the fields and you can't pick it yet before a bunch of it is destroyed, or cheesecloth tents are lost. So every decade something happens and it gets a little bit down. But in the past, they always had a back volume. They had a library of tobacco that they could rely on. And by the way, also, most farmers had a certain amount of tobacco set aside for themselves. Nowadays, man, the pressure is, we want every leaf because the government is like, we got to make cigars because we got to get currency. So none of this hanky-panky.
George, I was going to say,
Go ahead.
it's interesting that you mentioned the how the decades had affected. Because if you go back in history, remember 1992, they had that huge problem with blue mold. And then on 93, they had flooding with combination of black shank. They started to eat up all their inventories. But what happens? 1994, they get hit with blue mold. And that's when at the Institute of Tobacco in Pinar del Río, Vivaldo Garcia starts to work on Criollo
Hybrids.
98 and Corojo 99 that was resistant to black shank and blue mold.
And blue mold.
So, you know, things in Cuba have changed so much. I remember in one of my visits there, I used to spend a whole day with Robaina, and I asked Don Alejandro one day, you know, a lot of people don't know that the farmers do not grow what they want. It's what the government tells them what to grow. And at that time he was working with Corojo 99. And I asked him, Don Alejandro, if you would have the opportunity or you would have the decision to grow what you like, what would you do? And he says to me, and he said to me, and I still have, and he told Hirochi, bring me some. He said he would still take the risk and grow the original Corojo. And you know, the funny thing that this week, I can't remember who I was talking with. It was yesterday, a long conversation. And with your friend Sig, with Sig. I had a long conversation with Sig yesterday. And we were talking about the changes from the 70s to the 80s, from the 90s on. And one of the biggest changes in the taste profile of Cuban tobacco is because the wrapper for years and years and years was Corojo. And when they started to use these hybrids, Criollo 98, Corojo 99, and Habano, it changes. Why? Because the genetics, when you're trying to get it to work for more yield, to avoid the black shank, to avoid the blue mold, the genetics in one way or the other get affected.
Well, and so the funniest thing is that both of the things that you mentioned specifically that they were growing, that they were developing, crossbreeding to minimize their exposure, their risk to blue mold and black shank. Neither of those really proved successful in Cuba, but they proved extraordinarily successful both in Honduras and in Nicaragua, right? So they, you know, there's. Remember, we used to say Habano 98 is the most beautiful looking tobacco in the world, but the problem is it's asbestos. You know, it looks glorious, it won't burn. But so
but that was Habano 2000, George. Habano 2000.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty, but it had a burning problem.
They had a burning problem, but it had a not burning problem. So the thing is that once they turned away from Corojo, they were abandoning the tobacco that had made their reputation for a half a century, from the late 20s through the 60s, because they were still, you know, post Castro, they're still reliant on Corojo because they knew it was the signature crop and it was the thing that earned them global respect. But you know, again, when technocrats are ruling the roost, you have a problem. You know, you can't if you're taking the decision out of the farmer's hands, you're in trouble. And by the way, don't kid yourself. Corojo existed because of the efforts of some Cubans outside of Cuba who didn't want to see it die out. If it wasn't for Adi and her family and what they did with the Iroas, Corojo wouldn't exist today. Because you couldn't rely on I guarantee there are some farmers in Cuba that have a secret supply of Corojo, but it isn't anything that exists in enough quantity to be used commercially. It's a tragedy. You know, I mean, the fact is that in its home country where it was created, Corojo is now an heirloom seed. It's as rare as as apples from the 19th century.
True.
And by the way, even if they wanted to reintroduce it, they would have a number of issues about that. You know, in other words, you know very, very well, different types of tobacco require different handling techniques. What you do with the tobacco when it comes out of the field into the curing barns, how you work it afterwards, how long you ferment it. Everybody gets used to handling the material that is, you know, what's coming through their life. The Corojo generation is gone in Cuba.
Oh, yeah, it's gone.
I mean, because be sure of this. Hirochi doesn't know. He wouldn't know how to handle Corojo. You know, Don Alejandro could easily. I mean, he still had. When I was on the farm with him, he still had a patch of Corojo, but it's what they kept on the farm to roll. Remember, his neighbor down the street, 2 farms down, was the guy that was a retired cigar maker who made beautiful farm rolls, beautiful, magnificent flavors. But you couldn't do it today.
In addition to what you said, when I had those numerous conversations with Joel, of course, what he also said is one of the ongoing issues is they just don't have enough when it comes to supply of fertilizers, any type of pesticides they might have to use. So they're facing all sorts of issues because they're just short of all that material. Now, George, Jose, what do you think? I mean, how long can you, as a place of origin, as a country, as an island, as an organization, how long can you try and squeeze and milk the cow, even though you barely give it any food to live on and to sustain? How long can you keep that running? And yes, production numbers are constantly going down, and the supply of Cuban cigars internationally will just continue to dry up. But at what point do you think we will pass that critical mark where it's just not possible for people like Joel and other farmers to uphold that tradition and continue what they're doing because they're short of everything?
You know, and you and I have had this conversation both with George and with you, Reinhard. You know, I talk a lot with a lot of them, but I talk with them when they're in Ecuador and Honduras or Mexico or Costa Rica, because a lot of them have their kids that are doctors. The government would allow, if it's a couple or the wife goes or the husband goes. So I can talk freely with them. What people do not understand, that the problem with Cuba, first of all, they have a political situation where you can't. I'll give you an example. We had somebody from Cuba visiting us in January, and I had to take him to the supermarket and to buy some things. When they go out of the country, they buy deodorant, toothpaste, shampoo, rinse. And he says, I need some coffee. And I said, well, do you want to have some coffee? He says, no, I want to buy some coffee. I said, what, to bring back? I said, why? He says, because we're getting a coffee from Vietnam of 3rd category. And then he says, I need to get some salt. And I said, salt for what? When you see an island cannot produce salt, then Houston, we really have a problem. The salt is rationalized in Cuba also. But let's put that aside. Why does Cuba have so many problems with their cigars? And I know a lot of people hearing this problem, people are going to say, because you work with Fuente or you're Dominican or you're this. That's not the situation. All that is how a famous politician says fake news. The problem is they don't have the fertilizers. They do not age the tobacco, with the exception of some limitadas and some regional and some really high-end stuff. But what is aging for them? A year, 2 years? Well, companies like ours and Padron and other companies out there, you know, we're aging tobacco 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Really? When they come out and they tell you they made a production of cigars and they left them for 5 years there, that's the biggest lie in the world, because everything they make, everything is sent out because they need the money. You will only see the greatness of Cuba when the democracy comes back, when the private sector comes in, when there's freedom and people get paid. And the other thing, all my friends that went, distributors from Europe, from the Far East, from the Middle East, that went now to the festival, they said they had never seen the factories as low on people as for the last 20 years. The factories now, what they have is the ones that are 50, 60, and 70 years old. All the young guys took a fucking boat or they took the plane to Nicaragua, to Honduras, to Mexico, and to the States. So that's the other bigger problem that they have. Nicaragua has that problem, they're leaving, but guess what? The Cubans are leaving Cuba too.
Yeah. They've estimated over 200,000 people leaving Cuba per year for the last 3 years. Now, so conservatively 600, over 500,000 people in an island population of 8 or 9 million. That's disastrous. But you're talking about the inputs. You were mentioning this. That's what I was talking about when I said in the late 80s, the early 90s. Tobacco era, when basically the shift from Cuba tobacco to Habanos, when Altadas becomes a partner in all of that, they started supplying inputs for agriculture in a way that had immediate consequences, right? So they were getting support. What I've heard is that since this most recent takeover in terms of control, they're getting nothing. They're getting no outside revenue to support. So it's natural. Yield's going to go down, therefore quality is going to go down, therefore production of cigars overall, but in particular production of the highest end inventory is going to suffer. And I agree with you, Jose. It's laughable when you say some of these guys will tell you, oh, this was aged 5 years. Oh yeah, in what country? Certainly not in Cuba. More like 5 months. So they got pressures that they're not allowed to resist. They can't make the decision. It's not like a private company that can say we choose to take this much of our profits and return it to aging some tobacco and making some infrastructure investments and the kind of strategic things that you do to look forward to the future and enhancing your enterprise. They're not allowed to do that. They don't have. There's no. Individual farmers don't have the resources. What do you think the guy's going to do? I'm hiding some wood or some cinder blocks on my farm. It's not possible. It's like I said, it's tragic that these things exist. And so until such time as there is a free flow of information and investment capital can come in and assist some of these people, they're going to continue to struggle, and there's going to be downward pressure on their success rate, whether it's as a farmer, as a pre-industrial maturing the tobacco, or actually rolling the cigars in the factory and exporting them for sale. And to answer your question, Reinhard, that started this sort of mini diatribe from me, I honestly, really, truly believe that connoisseurs around the world, I'm not talking about people who want to flag fans or box and say, I have this in Young. I'm talking about people who are lifetime cigar smokers who really understand tobacco and are in touch with this. In other words, that let their taste buds talk to them. Those people have already been forced to turn away from Habanos and have discovered an alternate world of incredibly skilled cigar makers with a marvelous palette of tobacco at their disposal. And the things that they are creating are basically unimaginable to the typical Cuban. You see these guys that manage to get out and go to work, whether they land in Miami to work in a chinchal in Little Havana, or they go to Nicaragua and they work, for somebody like Padron or AJ or Pepin. They're like, their minds are blown. They're like, I can't believe this. It's an embarrassment of riches, right? It's like going from prison and then you get out after 10 years and go to the supermarket and you don't recognize anything that's on the shelves. There's an explosion of choice. So the world is being introduced to an amazing array of cigars and influences and designs that are as rich as what came from Cuba before the revolution. And don't forget, you know, it's corny to say all these kinds of things, but the Cuban diaspora, the talent drain that started in the 1960s, immediately after the revolution and the nationalization of the industries, the talent drain from Cuba has informed incredible cigar projects all over the world. And we're all, you know, we're the beneficiaries of that. So the combination of stubbornness on the behalf of the Cuban people and the recalcitrant nature of the US government in continuing to impose the embargo has been a boon to cigar lovers all over the world, because great cigar makers have gone to new countries and discovered new materials and offered us creations. Listen, you know, this sounds really silly to say, but in truth, we wouldn't have one of the greatest things that happened to cigars in the last 30 years. We wouldn't have Opus X if it wasn't for the Cuban Revolution and the ongoing failure in Cuba. Carlito would not have needed to grow that wrapper in the Dominican Republic to prove to the Frenchmen who poo-pooed what was happening in the factory because they weren't making puros, that the cigars weren't 100% Dominican. So that's just one minor gift to the world of cigar makers and cigar consumers. Does that make sense?
Please chime in and share your thoughts as well.
Sorry, you said me?
Joseph had his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I think he wanted to chime in. Carl, we'll get back to you in a second.
Yeah, we'll get to you, Carl.
You've studied the history of Cuba intensely and have shared some great insights and resources there. But Joseph, if you want to join us and share your question, please chime in.
Okay. Now you can hear me. Hello, everybody. It's nice to hear you again. It's nice to talking to everybody. And I can see here there is a guy, Jesus Castanon, from the guy who is from Cuba. And I can see my partner, Peter Hanuska here. And it is a big honor to talk to me with Jose Blanco. So hello, everybody. And maybe it will be nice to invite for a little bit guy, Jesus Castanon, who is here. He was a producer of cigars in Cuba, 15 years in Cohiba. And now he is my partner in Dominican Republic, who is producing cigars. So maybe this is very interesting what you are everybody talking about, and I would like to invite to talk more Jesus Castanon from Cuba. Maybe he have some good points for all this what we are talking about.
Hello, can you hear me all?
Yeah, yes, very well. Welcome.
Oh, hello, everybody. Interesting conversations. Joseph said, working Cuba back in the 90s in the Cohiba factory. Really what Jose Blanco and George have been saying is really true. You know, it's nothing to add to it. It's gonna be going down with time. It's about economics, it's about systems. And naturally, that's gonna happen everywhere you apply what they applied in Cuba. We had no way to make it better, even that we decided in Cuba to do as much as everybody else does in every country. But the group of people in charge doesn't allow that to happen. So I won't expect anything new, anything with more quality from Cuba, especially now. So like George said, you know, thanks to that, we have, you know, a lot of different options and alternatives in the market. The cost is that a lot of people, like the gentleman in the video that I didn't happen to watch, but I don't have to watch it to be there and know what's going on. That's the cost, that these people's lives get destroyed. We suffer in the market because no matter what brand we like, we don't like only one brand. I enjoy cigar from everywhere. I was a roller over there, and the salary, the incentive is not there anymore. Even that I remember that I was making little money there, but I still have pride in my job. And in my time, around the 2000, our pride was really high within the factory. We competed against each other. We really didn't care much about the political situation, and we in that industry did much better than even doctors, engineers, intellectuals in our country. So we were surviving, unfortunately, in the black market. That's how we survived, and they call it the black market, but it saved life in Cuba, dealing with the tourists. So it's sad, I'm just listening, the way you explaining everything, and there is really true information what you're giving. There is no misinformation, and it's all well put together. So for me, it's kind of personal because I've been there. I got friends still that work in those factories. I was able to travel to the United States back in 2002, start my own little shop in York, Pennsylvania, rolling cigars with my wife, raise my 3 children, and still enjoying. I'm right now in Dominican Republic, enjoying my life, enjoying my time. And that was all based on freedom. That was the freedom that I could have to do all that. And that's the problem in Cuba, everything else is there, just the freedom, the economics, the system. Don't expect anything better from Cuba because it's impossible. That would be magic. And we're talking about tobacco, we're talking about cigars, we're talking about something that we can control. We have to work with nature. We have to have what we need to make sure that the quality is there. We can just make that, make it up. And so I appreciate that this conversation today is about Cuba and about the situation. And I can see that you all feel sorry about what everybody's going through there. And well, hopefully one day people will be free and be able to live better life and enjoy the reward of their job and their work. So glad to be here and glad to meet everybody, and and see people like you guys that know exactly what's going on, even more than people working in Cuba and living in Cuba, because you have more access to information that they do. So thank you for sharing with the world the truth.
Jesus,
Reinhard, can I?
Jesus, excuse me, George.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. Jesus, did
Yes.
you know Hilda Basora?
In Cuba.
Sí.
Don't remember the name. I don't remember by name right now either.
Basora.
To be honest, yeah, I don't
Okay,
remember
I
her
ask you
name
for
now.
another person, Deborah Garcia. She used to run quality control at Partagas.
No, because I work in El Laguito.
Okay,
Jose.
but let me ask you this. Did you ever know Mike?
Mike.
Sí. He was president of Habanos.
No, never deal
Okay.
with these people. No. Never deal with these
Well,
people.
Jesus, this is George. I was going to ask you, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but what I was going to ask you was contrast the materials that you ended up working with, not necessarily when you're in York, because that could have been, the result of being too small, but contrast the materials you were working with in Laguito when you left, not at the peak, not in the big years when it was boom and they were giving you great materials, but contrast the materials that you were working with at Laguito before you left and what you're handling now in the Dominican Republic.
Absolutely. I have seen Cuba going on the direction of less quality on the materials, and I have seen different factories around the world going higher in quality of the materials, getting better and better all the time. So I mean, it is what it is. In my time, we had good materials, but right
Yeah.
now I've found incredible tobacco leaf out of Cuba, make great cigars, and while I see them going down in quality, asking more money, and lying more. So yeah, it's different. It's worse. Can't compare. And just
But
a
the
few years.
materials that you're working with in La República Dominicana now, how do you contrast them in terms of quality and variety compared to what you were working with in Cuba?
I'll tell you that right now, what I kind of the same level. I have some leaf that I prefer, even compared with Cuban, but their material in my time was good compared with any material around the world. I would say probably was still better, not because I said so, but the people's subjective opinion was that the demand and the consumers say it. But I think right now, if I don't have Cuban tobacco, which I don't get that, it's not a problem. You know what I mean? It's something that it won't affect the consumers because the quality around the world is there in tobacco leaf. I mean, they are behind. That's what I would say to resume my answer. They're behind right now in quality,
Yes.
unfortunately. And, you would think that in my time that would stay for forever, being the top quality tobacco in the world, the top cigars, but they have changed. Absolutely. And you're right. So.
Well, good luck. Continued good luck with what you're doing. I'm glad that you're in the DR and making cigars and leading an independent life instead of struggling.
I am doing all that. Yes, sir. I am doing that. I wish that for everybody, but that I can just make it happen. You know what I mean? I wish I could.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just want to say it again before I finish that I thank you for saying the truth. You know what you're talking about. And I appreciate that. I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, it's great hearing from you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jesus, many thanks for chiming in and providing your perspective. Great to hear such insights from the people who worked in Cuba and who had hands-on experience with the materials and the people and the challenging situations there. It's greatly appreciated. So many thanks for joining us.
Mucho gusto.
Yes. Mucho gusto igual. Mucho gusto.
Ian, over to you. Ian, I can't hear you, unfortunately. I don't know if you're not muted, but I don't hear you for some odd reason. Well, we'll give Ian a moment to sort the audio. In the meantime, Karl, I wanted to bring you in again. As I said earlier, you have studied Cuban history extensively. You've shared some great bits and pieces of information through articles, video material. Listening to everything that we're sharing today and the video from Joel, the insights from Jesus, how do you put all of this together? And as a young enthusiast and cigar lover, how do you look at things and how do you put everything into perspective there?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's amazing listening to this. I feel a little silly speaking here. I mean, with these pieces of living history, the stories are incredible. Don Alejandro, Rovaina, Jesus with his perspective, George and Jose. I mean, it is incredible to listen. I guess what I can benefit with, though, Jose said he might get criticism. He has a bias working for Fuente. I have no horse in this race, and I sign off on everything he said. It's 100% true. It is quite sad. I mean, they mentioned the mass exodus from Cuba. All these people are fleeing the country. I mean, the numbers I have seen since the pandemic and still to this day, it's the rolling rooms are supposed to be 50% capacity, is what I'm hearing, and that's that is insane. I mean, obviously, of course, that makes sense if we're hearing the numbers are so low in production. That's the reason why, and it feels a little bit funny to this is supposed to be Joel's show, right? The guy in the beginning of the show, but this has just been a sort of a shitting on Cuba party. But it's none of the people's fault. The people like him. I mean, it's just a horrific situation, and the government. I mean, I read quite recently they put some new leaders in Habanos, so some new co-vice presidents, and I remember reading that article from Half Wheel, and my naive, maybe wishful mind, I was like, oof, maybe some young people, a breath of fresh air. And it's, one of them is this guy called Perez Martel, and his dad is just an ex-general in one of the Cuban revolutions. There's no merit. It's just, it's just straight nepotism, and the inner circles are just they just rule. And I mean, like George and Jose said over and over here, the people that are making the decisions are people that are not connected to this industry. I mean, they have the final say, and then it's so hard to work with this artisanal product that takes so many years to make when the people that make the decisions are doing it. I mean, just based off the profits and whatever numbers they feel they want in this moment. So, I mean, it's tiring to follow this. I've just been following this nightmare story for 6 years since I started, but it's just exhausting to see. Nothing is getting better. It's quite the opposite. So, I mean, I have whatever Cuban cigars I have are probably the ones that I'll end up smoking for whatever until, if there's ever a miracle change. I'm not looking for Cuban cigars. I'm one of those people that George mentioned that. I've turned my sights to new horizons, and I'm discovering some amazing cigars all the time, and I'm quite satisfied with that. So, that's my 2 cents. I don't want to waste more time speaking when we have these incredible guests. But thank you for bringing me in again.
Karl, not at all, and it's wonderful to hear your perspective as well, because I think what's so charming about the show is to have people from all walks of life, also all various ages, and representing different parts of the industry, whether that's as media professionals, cigar lovers, or people who've been heavily connected with the industry for decades. Bringing all these different perspectives together is what makes these shows worthwhile. And I would agree with everything you said, apart from the fact that we're not trying to bash Cuba in any way, shape, or form. No. Quite the contrary. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth in the person of Joel, just what's actually happening there. And the glimpse of hope that I take away from all of it, when I think back to that moment when they were all dancing and loving and still embracing, the good things in life. And whilst the show was going on, Joel was sending me pictures of tourists coming by and people visiting, and it's wonderful to see how they still keep that energy and that flame and the enthusiasm alive, and that's what's mesmerizing to see, that little glimpse of hope and passion in people's eyes, in particular as a farmer, the people who are connected to the land, to the soil, and to Mother Nature. As Joel said, and Jesus agreed to this, we're working with Mother Nature, and that's what I take away from today's show in particular is there's always a glimpse of hope, right? And as long as we don't lose that passion and that connection with what it's all about, there's still hope somewhere and light at the end of the tunnel, even though the situation is so challenging. And we just try to provide a holistic perspective and look at things from all various angles in order to put information into perspective and get a bit of a better understanding of what's actually happening. Ian, I think you sorted the audio, so please chime in again, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and your question.
Can you hear me now?
Very well.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening with my computer. A question. I mean, it's very sad what's happening with Cuban tobacco, but question perhaps for Jose and maybe George. If they're not aging the tobacco in the fields, will the cigars improve? If you keep your cigar for 5 years, will it improve, or does it really need to be aged before it goes into the cigar? Because you know, I don't buy Cuban cigars. I'm not going to pay £60 for one stick of you know, for a single cigar. But you know, Cuba is charging ridiculous prices now, and they seem to be getting away with it. But this can't go on if the quality is going down. Eventually, even the Chinese will realize that they're not smoking good cigars.
Listen, to be honest, this is something, you know, we always talk about. They ask us about aging of tobacco. What do I tell people who still like to buy Cubans? When you're going out there, try to look at the dates and try to buy anything that's 2 or 3 years old. Now, if you buy something that's coming out now in March, you open up the box, you smoke one. First of all, you open up the box, you smell it. You're going to pick up that ammonia to it. But just to be sure, you smoke one of them and you make notes. Put it away for a year. Then you open up the box again and you smoke a cigar. It definitely will improve. But that will have to be at least, I'm telling people, put those boxes of cigars away at least 2 to 3 years. Now, that said, you're not going to get anything out of there. Maybe some rare, limited editions, some regionals that are going to have tobacco that's going to be 4 or 5 years old, like they say. I think the max that they're doing right now, regular production, from what I'm hearing, the tobacco is just a year, and other stuff is a year, year and a half, maybe 2 years. My recommendation, you buy them, you like your Cubans, put them away, and then pray to God that when you cut the cigar, it's going to draw, because that's the other problem.
I mean, I have a comment. Ray has sort of interjected here with a comment in the chat, and he's a cigar retailer. I wonder what his view is of the Cubans, and are his customers, you know, complaining about the quality of the Cubans that they're getting?
Hi guys. Well, not at all, to be honest. I've got a lot of Chinese customers in my shop, and the only one they care is Cohiba. They don't care, and I mean the big Cohibas, Siglo 6, Siglo 5, Beike, Talisman, Robusto, that kind of stuff. They don't care about anything else. Doesn't matter the price. Cohiba Robusto at the moment is £99 a piece. No problem. They'll take them all. I don't have a stock of Cohiba Robusto. Even if it's £200 a piece, they'll buy them. I've tried every time to offer something different, and I have over 500 different SKUs: Cuban, non-Cuban, Dominican, Nicaraguan. They don't care. That's the only brand they're looking, Cohiba. That's my comment on this one.
Yeah,
I mean, this is I have next to me are 5 universities around me. There's a lot of Chinese students who are basically buying for friends abroad. There's many times someone on a call, and the guy in the shop showing everything in the display, and the guy was literally stopped on the Cohiba, and that's it. They don't want to move on the other stuff. I've got anything you can imagine Cuban, even stuff which you don't see often in the shelves, like, you know, short churchill, white churchill, Rio Secro, D4, P2, anything else, Trinidad, every Trinidad you can imagine. No, that's only Cohiba.
Well, look, they're victims of their own branding, because they can't produce enough Cohibas to meet that demand. So you have business walking out every day. But you know, there is a limit, and I think that there's a different kind of customer that's out there that is embracing non-Cuban production. But let's go back to the question that was raised about short fermentation time for tobaccos and brief resting time post fermentation in the fields. If you make a cigar with improperly or poorly fermented tobacco and sit on it for 3 or 4 years, all you're going to get is a blander version of a badly made cigar, because it's made with improperly fermented tobacco. And we learned all that in the boom years of the 90s, when all kinds of people were growing tobacco that had no business doing it, and you had factories rolling with inexperienced rollers who didn't know to reject poor material, and the cigars that were produced were essentially unsmokable. You can't take time, even 36 or 48 months, only minimizes the power, not the flavor, not the complexity, not the depth of tobacco that's improperly fermented. You are never going to get a balanced, rich, complex cigar like you expect from a great Havana if it's made with tobacco that was fermented for a few months and then rested in the warehouses for less than a year.
George,
That's
I couldn't
that's what I
before,
thought,
and I
George.
always
Yeah.
bring the analogy of the wine industry, where if you have a red wine, for example, with green tannins, unripe, notes in there, you can put it aside all you want. All you'll be left with after a couple of years is an aged wine that wasn't properly put together in the first place and not properly worked. And I think the same is true for cigars, as you just explained in a very eloquent way.
You'll have a well-rested bad wine that won't be worth whatever price is being asked for it.
But there's something I want to say. When we're talking, when I started to talk, I think the problem with the Cubans is not the fermentation process. I think the fermentation process, they're more or less doing it. The problem with them is you're doing fermentation, of course, depending on, on the primings and all that and the type of tobacco. We don't even know what they're using now. But when, let's say you do the fermentation process correctly, it could be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. The problem with them is after they do that process, that should go 2 to 3 years in the warehouse, because still the fermentation process continues to go at a very, very low temperature. And if you want to see that, you weigh, let's say, a bale of tobacco that's, let's say, 100 pounds, and it's 100 pounds today. If you weigh it in a year, it's going to be less if you weigh it in 2 years. So what happens? The essential oils, they start to harmonize with the tobacco. And that's when you open up a bale of tobacco that's been correctly fermented and aged. You open it up and you take that, you put it there. What are you going to pick up? It's going to be like plume, or it's going to be like raisins, and you're going to pick up the sweetness. The problem, because the fermentation in Cuba can be correct, but then because they don't have the aging, that's when you pick up a box of cigars that you smell the ammonia. And every time that people have gifted me boxes and cigars, I smell them and I put them away a year, year and a half, 2 years. I have Cuban cigars here that are 30 years old. I mean, that's just to show off at friends, but it's not really that. It is what it is. But that is the truth. They do not give their tobacco the time necessary that we do in Dominican, that we do in Nicaragua, and that we do in Honduras.
Many thanks, Jose. Brian, over to you in Los Angeles.
Hey, what a fascinating conversation. Good afternoon. Carl, I just saw you yesterday. So this is a novice question from me as usual, and probably something I guess I could Google. But I'm curious about how these companies have this non-Cuban parentheses situation, like Partagas, non-Cuban, Cohiba, Monte Cristo, non-Cuban, parentheses. Because I was embarrassed one time after a call, we were hanging out, and I'm like, I have a Partagas in my humidor, and everyone's like, what? In the States? And I was like, yeah, check it out. And they're like, oh, that's a non-Cuban, idiot. So how does this work in terms of branding and ownership and relationships between entities and nations and companies? How does that happen?
Well, to be honest, I mean, after the revolution, they nationalized everything. So all those brands had owners. Some of the owners sold, some of the owners died, and the big companies brought everything up. And it's something interesting. I don't know if George could talk about it. 2 or 3 years ago, there was something in Congress, actually it was in the Senate, where they're trying to pass a law where you cannot use any of the Cuban brands. So it's reintroduced again, and it's reintroduced by Bob Menendez, which is Democrat from New Jersey, and also from Marco Rubio. So what they're proposing is that in this case, Altades cannot use Montecristo, Romeo, and H. Upman. Then General cannot use Punch,
Pollo.
Sancho Panza, Stratos, Rafael Gonzalez. So that would probably, if that were to happen, Altades would probably have to become a very small company. General has an advantage that has Cohiba, that they've won, that's probably going to go to court, and they have Macanudo. So that would change really the worlds of cigars in the United States and for those big companies. But any of those Cuban brands that are made in Dominican Republic cannot be sold in any part of the world. You cannot even use the word Havana with the V or Habano with the B in any part of the world because it's intellectual property by the Cuban government. I know that George can elaborate on this too.
Well, echo all of that, but let's put a finer point on it. First of all, it's unlikely all that legislation is sponsored by Cuban Americans, and it's designed to prevent the idea, which is several years old now. There used to be combined ownership. In other words, Altades, in the days when they were investors in Habanos, and were still the owners of all these front marks for sale outside in the United States only. In other words, they couldn't sell their versions of Montecristo and H. Upman, for example, of Altades. They couldn't sell them outside the United States. In the rest of the world, those marks are exclusively Cuban. But there's nothing that says they couldn't redevelop those slightly. Don't forget, when Menendez and Garcia first reintroduced the non-Cuban version of Montecristo in the U.S. market, it was called Monte Cruz and manufactured in the Canary Islands. It was only after a significant amount of legislation and time passed that they were able then to return to using the Montecristo name. And shortly after, they expanded and adopted. That was a sort of a byproduct of the boom and the money that they made. That they began mimicking the Cuban trade dress for H. Upman, and for a while, people thought that what you call General, but STG, the Scandinavic Tobacco Group, owners of General, and therefore Partagas and Ramoneones and La Gloria Cubana, that those guys started to directly mimic the Cuban trade dress. But guess what? In the end, the consumers absolutely reject the idea that these products have anything to do with the actual Cuban counterpart. So outside of the United States, even if you were to sell that product in similar trade dress but altered name somehow, the people would, by default, the Cuban legacy label has a degree of superiority in consumer recognition. Does that help? Does it say anything about the inherent quality of the cigars that are being considered? No, but it's about legacy. Now, I look. It's highly unlikely, by the way, specifically to General Cigar and having their version of Cohiba. They're back in court again. This has been theoretically debated, and it bounces back and forth. One time Cuba wins in Hague, the next time the United States and General wins. At the most recent victory was in General's favor, but it's being litigated all over again. And there are a lot of people who question. The honesty of doing that, since Cohiba is clearly a brand that was invented and created post-revolution. So they don't have a prayer. They don't have a legitimate leg to stand on about why they have it. Now, they've made it and marketed it for decades with a trade dress that doesn't have anything to do with the most recognizable cigar identification in the world. There's no, Cohiba and that band supplanted Monte Cristo as the national flag of Cuba.
So depending on the legalities, you might see these disappear entirely or be rebranded, in which case I assume they wouldn't sell as much.
Well, in the United States, I think the customers that are there for them would continue to buy them regardless of what they called them, because they would be familiar with them and appreciate the quality, the tobacco, the blends, and everything that's there. But what I'm saying to you, Brian, is that I think it's highly unlikely that legislation goes through and stops these companies from activity that they've been engaging in for 50 and 60 years in some cases, legitimately selling these products, which they got the rights to do in the United States from the original owners of those brands. In the most cases, some of them were actually in corporate hands, so there wasn't an issue. It was there were cigars that were known as Cuban cigars, but the real ownership was in the United States. So it's not as simple as, oh, they're going to reject the notion that these brands that have Cuban names but are twinned products, in other words, the non-Cuban counterparts sold in this market. It's highly unlikely that a trademark jury and judge would say, oh, this is clearly bad practice. Introducing that kind of legislation, I think, is mostly political grandstanding.
I don't think it's going to pass, but you know, one thing, George, is that a lot of people don't understand that post-revolution, the only brands that don't have ownership is Cohiba, San Cristobal, Robaina, and Guava. The
ones that were created post-revolution, all of those, with the exception of Cohiba, all of those were created during the boom of the 90s. And they were specifically created by Cuba to create prestige brands that were not subject to any trademark litigation. No lawsuit could bring them down.
Exactly. But I think it's only those four brands: Guava, San Cristobal, Robaina, and Cohiba. I can't remember if there's another one. Which one?
And Vegueros.
Vegueros, okay. Okay.
But Vegueros has always been mostly a colonial cities production, and it's more about selling. Vegueros was traditionally an island only. It really wasn't an export brand the way the others were.
Time to call in more lawyers, Macy. Thanks for the link, Carl. Thanks for the answer, guys.
And Brian, you just proved again that who on earth needs Google if you have George Brightman and Jose Blanco and Carl from the Stogie Lads. He put up a great link. The Stogie Lads did an amazing video on this particular subject. So check it out. The link is in the comments there. Steve.
Reinhard, before we skip over to Steve, number one, I got to log off in a few minutes because I still got work to do. But I think at some point what we should do, and Jose can help me put something like this together, we should have a taste-off where we are actually comparing the best of Hoyo de Monterrey from Honduras with the best of Hoyo from Cuba, and compare Partagas and Monte Cristo. I'm not sure I'd really even want to do Cohiba because they're so far apart in there, and they're not truthfully related in terms of style or approach or anything. But Hoyo and Partagas and Punch and Romeo and H. Upman, all of those are in some way, shape, or form the non-Cuban versions that were aimed at the U.S. market, had as their primary ambition to reproduce elements of the house style of those cigars prior to the revolution.
That sounds like a project, George. We'll be working on it.
Okay.
There's actually an interesting little twist. Yeah, there's actually an interesting little twist to this story. There's an entrepreneur in Morocco who discovered that Habanos SA didn't ever register their company name in the country. So he created a cigar company in Morocco called Habanos SA and is selling cigars in, I've been into the Marrakesh store, and I did actually purchase one of each of the Vitolas and the brands, which are a complete rip-off of Davidoff and other Cuban brands. So blatant. I haven't actually smoked one yet because they do look rather ropey. but it's been through the courts as far as I know, and I think he actually won in his favour, or at least it was abstained. You know, as a non-entity, wasn't going anywhere, kind of thing. But yeah, I'll let you know what they're like when I do actually get around to smoking one. But they are all monsters of cigars, all very, very big vitolas, but they are very ropey looking.
Davidoff used to spend a fortune fighting the counterfeiters in Brazil who were outside typical legal, you know, constraints. And even after having lost in court several times around, they continued to produce counterfeit Davidoffs in Brazil, effectively with impunity that would, you know, leak around the world thanks to duty-free and travelers and stuff like that. But the cigars were atrocious by comparison. I mean, there was no, it was a travesty.
Steve, very interesting bit of information, though. Many thanks for sharing, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on the Moroccan Habanos. So keep us
Moroccan Habanos. What a hilarious phrase!
You know that it's funny that Steve mentioned that because in Canada there's a famous case. Actually in Canada, the punch that's sold in Canada is actually made by General. Because Frank Yanessa registered that years and years ago before boom and everything, and gave it to the people of House of Horvath. Horvath, Joe Horvath, that died. And the Cubans for years and years and years fought when things were really not so pricey in Canada, because now a $5 cigar is a $25 cigar in Canada. And I was shocked the first time I went to Canada in 1999, and I didn't see a Cuban punch. So you know, sometimes the company screwed up, and it is what it is. So let's see how those cigars out of Morocco taste.
George, being respectful of your time and of course everybody else's time, what a delightful show today. I want to thank all of you for sharing your perspectives, your thoughts. I want to do a quick wrap up, and Karl, we'll start with you, and let's share some final remarks and comments before we log off for today. But what a terrific show, and I'm very glad that we could open this segment with Joel's insights from Cuba, and then have this very vivid discussion with you gentlemen, George, Jose, and Karl, and everybody chiming in. So many thanks, and let's do a quick roundup and a quick final remark round. Karl.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, Reinhard, especially listening to George and Jose. My God, I just it's crazy that it's been so long already, because time has just flown by truly. Interesting on the Moroccan non-Cubans. I've never heard about that. I know it is more of a jungle than it seems. I had a friend who's in Iraq like a month ago, and you could find every single non-Cuban Cuban cigar there, like all the Cohibas, Partagas, all that stuff for some reason. So I don't know. The legislation is crazy. There's probably a lot of loopholes around. But yeah, Reinhard, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me as always. Jose, it's always a true pleasure to see you, especially 2 days in a row. That's that makes the week even better. And George, the same to you. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you from Hard Call. And again, please keep up the tremendous work with Stogie Lads. You're providing extremely valuable insights when it comes to history and all the nitty gritty and those great information on some Cuban history, but also other stuff all around the world. So keep it up. And everybody, if you haven't, check out the Stogie Lads, the great work that Karl and Ruben have been doing there for years. So kudos to you, gentlemen. Jose.
Well, to be honest, I think the show's been interesting for many reasons. First of all, like I said, if we were to give an Oscar, I would give it to this guy who did a tremendous, without any resources, just showing to us the reality, seeing a curing barn that has been 6 months in the work, and it seems a part of it, I guess he cured some tobacco. I don't know if he had some other curing barns. If he had that much acreage, it's very hard to do it only with one little barn. With one little barn. I mean, the guy, I mean, Jesus did all these miracles. So this guy would be like the Jesus of tobacco in Cuba, to be able to do all these things with that. I give the guy a lot of credit. I hope one day, I don't know, I don't have in my near future a trip to Cuba, but I hope one day before I die to see freedom, to see the greatness of Cuba and the Cuban people. I think the best is yet to come. But what we have learned tonight is not that everything that shine is gold. It's the sad reality of what the Cubans are going through. And the only thing that we could do is pray for them, that one day they have democracy, the greatness of Cuba, not only for tobacco, for sugar, for what it is. And I can tell you, when that happens, the world will be better, our industry will get stronger, and we will be able to have a combination of Dominican and Nicaragua and Cuban tobacco in one cigar, and who knows what could happen in Cuba, because they're going to need a lot. But other than that, always great to be here with my good friend George Brightman, and of course with this young rising star, with Karl, that I think the best is yet to come from him. Even though I have to say this, Reinhard, we've seen the best from you already, so be careful. This guy's
he's right behind you.
He surpassed me a long time ago, so I'm very, very happy to give credit when credit is due. So Jose, many thanks for the warm words, and thank you so much as always for joining us and sharing your wonderful pieces of information. George Brightman.
Okay, first and foremost, I don't want us to leave with the idea that we were Cuba bashing this whole 2 hours, because that wasn't the intent. The world is a better place when there are great Cuban cigars to be smoked and shared by cigar lovers around the world. It's just that right now there aren't that many of them, and clearly the struggles that Joel is facing are an illustration of that, of what the problems are. Looking at that. The video clips that you strung together there, it's really tough to watch, because it shows how bad things are on the ground. And yeah, he had great spirit in trying to put something together, and it shows his pride. But boy, oh boy, the circumstances and the working conditions are really heartbreaking. So we will hope and pray that things improve there, and that the world has the opportunity to enjoy great Cuban tobacco, whether it's being rolled in Cuba or incorporated into cigars made by fantastic cigar makers other places in the world. I still believe those days are possible, that's an outcome we should all be hoping for. But in the meantime, as cigar lovers, we have no shortage of great places to turn for magnificent smokes. And the example of our friend with the shop and talking to the young Chinese guys coming in who only want to buy Cuba, it's their loss. The fact that they're ignoring this enormous palette of extraordinary inventory out there right now is their loss in our game, because it just means more for us to smoke. But anyway, keep up the great work. I love being able to join you today. Always, anytime I can lay eyes on my friend Jose, it's great. But it was fantastic having everybody else chime in.
Thank you from heart, George. It was a brilliant, brilliant opportunity to share a cigar with you all again. Many thanks for chiming in. Join us next week. We'll have Tim Osgener with us talking about the Osgener family cigars. So please be back next Wednesday. Thanks everybody for chiming in. Light them up.
All right.
Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Jesus, bye-bye. Ciao, ciao, everybody.